Good morning. Welcome to Saturday Morning Roundtable. I'm sure there'll be other people joining us in a moment. If you're watching on Facebook, there's a link to a StreamYard Facebook to join. And we'll just start. What have you been up to with your projects?
Yesterday we had the first app prototype planning session where we sort of actually went a bit deeper into the technical part of doing a prototype for a web app. That was pretty good. It was the full hour and it was, I think, useful. We tried to avoid going too technical, but it was more like 4 people, I guess, sort of in my role, who like aren't developers but are the ones sort of trying to plan how it works, which I think is a fairly common position to be in the projects group. So I think that will hopefully be helpful. I mean, that's where the project is at right now, just trying to work on getting the prototype out. We actually got sort of a new version of the prototype release yesterday, so now there's like a member login and an actual database and stuff behind it. So it's moving along. How's your project?
I don't even know where I'm at in my project. We had 2 solution raisings this week, though. We had one on suicide and one on self-help, both of which were powerful, I found. The self-help one, I thought there'd be more people in. It was just, I reached out to one person. We scheduled one for Friday, and then he was the only one who showed up, which is fine. And but they were both good. And we had our 4th or 5th process raising, which seems to be coming together. Raymond and I are going to meet next week to talk about mission and vision for the process raising. It only took us 4 weeks to get to mission and vision so that we can then look for more people in order to do the foundational documents or to go through the protocol.love that is his, which I'm looking forward to. And just playing in the tension of having slightly different visions, but like between this and together, like between process raising and together tech, I feel like it's both, it's the flip side of each coin. It's like, bring your project and own it, and like, how do we help each other versus, okay, we all have our own project, but at the same time, how can we create something together that isn't necessarily OmniWin for our projects, but actually OmniWin for society and our lives, and like that side. And they're completely different, like, emotions that get triggered and in the process, and so it's interesting. And then, as I mentioned before going live, that just personally, I'm dealing with more interpersonal health stuff and healing. Started different programs and stuff. So although that's not directly related, it definitely ties into all of that. So I don't know what I would need help with besides just, no, I really don't know what I would need help with.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff I need help with, I'm getting help with. That was yesterday's session.
Perfect.
Yep.
Well, we're done. 3 minutes in.
Yeah. That's a new record.
Let's see if anyone else joins and we can focus on their project. This could become an impromptu project raising.
There we go.
Yeah. We could talk about, I mean, I'm pretty excited that we have a lot of people in Game B projects. In fact, the Rebel Wisdom did a podcast on Game B and then actually had, did you watch it? It actually had our image on it. Like, it was like, and there's these side projects, right? Like the side groups. And one of them was Game B projects. In fact, there might have been one other one, but like they showed our logo at the top. And then, so I think that's why a lot of people ended up finding us.
Okay.
And Game B.
Because I saw one of the comments saying like, yeah, we tried to join Game B, but it's not allowing our invitation yet. So we just joined this instead. Right.
Well, I've said that to people. I was like, they might not let you in for a bit, but we seem to be letting a lot of people in. So, I mean, I'm doing the welcome message. So every few days, I'm like, it's been 50. Okay, I got to do I have to actually do a welcome message today. So that.
How many is the main group at?
Almost 2,000.
Wow.
Or like 1,900 around. Yeah. But it's also, I mean, we don't want it to grow too fast because there's also like this energy when you first come into it that's like you want to post and do all this stuff. And it's like, okay, yep, cool. But if the new people coming in do that every time, then
then it's just a flood.
Yeah, exactly. And so that is why we do the welcome message, so people hopefully post under there. I mean, here I wouldn't mind in our Facebook group, people posted their project as individual when they first came in one time, and then when you have your project right under your update for your project, what it is. My brain fog is pretty awesome today. So
yeah, mine's still clearing. I've been awake for maybe 20 minutes.
I'm on my second coffee. And my kid has a dental appointment, COVID-19
Ooh,
dental appointment. They phoned
fun.
yesterday. We're like, is she still coming? I was like, sure. What do we need to do? I'm like, well, that's still a necessity. But that should be interesting. There's a lot of new precautions.
Still have to wear a mask the whole time. That might
We
make
have to
it hard.
come in a mask. And so, I mean, but they're in your mouth. I mean, you can't wear a mask when they're in your mouth. I could wear a mask, but she can't necessarily. Oh. Good morning, Bentley.
Hey, sorry I'm late.
That's all right. We already did our updates. We have nothing to ask for. So we're just like talking otherwise. Would you like to give your update, Bentley?
Yes. Trying to think what I wrote on the Facebook post. Yeah, I don't feel like I've accomplished a lot this week. I have reached out to some people. I guess I'm in the point of the system where I need to start small practices and kind of user. Can't remember what it's called right now. I haven't woken up yet. But yeah, where you work with some users in a small thing and kind of get small feedback rather than group stuff. So I'm trying to have some debates in areas that I'm interested in, but they're all really complex. It's nutrition science and stuff. So yeah, I'm starting that. I guess that's really the only real update. I didn't do any code this last week on the project. I was working on someone else's project, so we're doing a no-code meeting and a local Dallas meetup website. So I'm helping my friend Carrie get a LinkedIn login working for her community site. So I guess that's mostly the way I've been spending my time. And as far as requests, I've been thinking it would be nice if someone had some debates, if anyone like has a topic that they want to experiment with, they don't mind playing with a untested system on finding agreement in a complex debate would be fun.
What is the number of people you need to be able?
Well, I think just me and someone else, hopefully if we're actually disagreeing on a topic. Or even what would be really great is if two people who know each other and are comfortable having a debate wanted to do it through the system. And it might not even, like, it'd be nice to do like a live video, but some of the debate will happen afterwards because it would be like, oh, I need to do some research and find the studies that back this up. And so it could be a series of videos or not even doing videos at all. And it'd just be like, they both have access to the system. They go and enter data and just kind of see how the flow goes. So those are the different ways of doing it.
Morning.
It's back together.
Hey, Marchus.
You want to give an update on? Oh, sorry, Bentley. Are you? I guess
Yeah,
since you
I'm done.
muted, you're probably done. Matoush, do you want to give your update? And
My update about my projects. Oh, just general.
If you have any project updates, yeah. You don't have to.
Yeah, I was still ironing out some stuff, which I'm not sure at this point if I'm just reluctant to make it all public in one go, and I'm just finding and looking for more excuses to just fix one more bug before going live, or is it something that really needs to be fixed before?
There's always one more bug.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess I am just afraid of releasing it. But so I kept doing that, and about this week, also Adriel's project was on like my list of things, and I did make quite a good progress with this, which I am glad. And yeah, that's me. Short version.
awesome. We're done by 10 minutes. April and I finished by 3. We're like, we can just call it a day here. And then you guys came on. But now what do we want to talk about? No one had, like, we're all kind of moving forward on our projects. We don't really have. Bentley, though, you had something. So, like, who can we think of that wants to have a debate that we could?
Yeah, or we could bounce around ideas for topics or...
So is there any sort of more clarity on what might help pick a topic? Because I know you've sort of been through topics, and every time it gets like, oh, that's too complex, that's too complex.
Yeah, and maybe the problem is how to simplify it. And so now I'm thinking that It can be a complex topic. I just don't know how quickly people get bored. But maybe a way around that is to just take turns. So you put in a fact or maybe two at a time, and that way you're always kind of exploring. And maybe another way to kind of get around that is to let people manually put their confidence in a statement. So you can say, here's a study and that I think proves my point by like 75% or whatever like that. And that way they don't have to go deeper than that. If both people agree, then you never have to explore that data. But if you don't, then you can choose which one you want to explore, and then it's kind of a growing thing. When right now I feel like, kind of like what Mark Touche was saying, that you can't, I don't know when to release it, because at any point it's like, well, I only have 5 studies. I know there's like 500 in here. Isn't that cherry picking? But then I have to put it out there and say, this is cherry picked. If you don't agree with my cherry picked things, your responsibility is to go find the studies I missed and put them in and explain why. So now I'm thinking it can be any topic, but it would be good if the people are really interested in it, because it is really boring work. Unless you're interested in the topic. And it could, so, there's lots of stuff right now. Like, it could be like take a proposal, like the 8 proposals on criminal justice reform. I can't remember what the website was, but
it can't wait.
Yeah, it can't wait. So you could choose like just one of those or talk about the whole thing. I think it'd be better if it was one of the proposals and debate that. Although when I posted that on my Facebook and Twitter, no one was really arguing with any of the proposals. Oh, cops shouldn't beat people unless they... Yeah, that sounds like it. I guess actually the immunity one might be interesting because cops are often put in situations where they have to do things that the general public may not understand as being correct. So if they're in a jury room, they could get convicted for doing something that they had to do. Anyways, so stuff like that would... Yeah, I think now I'm thinking that most anything would work. I was just being too perfectionistic. So that's part of the learning process.
As a Game B admin, how about I invite anytime there's a debate on the page to be like, Bentley, you take it outside, but like on this very specific debate format.
Yeah, I've thought about that, whether it'd be useful. If you see one, let's okay. Talk about it and see whether that would work. Oftentimes, though, especially recently, one of the people in the debate seems to be disingenuous, and the system isn't really good at handling trolls yet. It assumes both people. But if you think there's 2 or 3 or several people that are having this, we could even take the arguments they've already kind of made and put them into the chart and say, well, this is where we understand the discussion is. I think it'd be useful in some of the debates on how to do adminning, because everyone in there is genuinely wants to see Game B succeed. So that might be interesting. Should we ever ban somebody? When should we ban some people and stuff like that? But
yeah, I kind of like that. Like actually using it to try to make some decisions for the Game B group. Or like that as all, and even if we are, trying to make it binding or anything, just to be like, hey, here's what came out in the wash when we looked at like what are the values that the Game B projects group stands for, right? Like what do we consider a Game B project?
Yeah.
And,
The challenge in there is also that it's not real good as far as like, there's a part in the debate in the group decision-making process where you're expanding the ideas, like, oh, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. And then you're kind of paring them down to the best ideas. It's really, the tool is only really useful when you're testing one idea. So if someone says we should ban anyone that uses the F word, right? then you could do that one. But it's not real good if you have a couple of options and try and choose the best one. It's just not a good tool for that. But if someone has a specific proposal, it would be really good. We could also use it in some of our projects. I haven't decided whether we have someone come up with a new project idea, and I'm kind of like, I don't think that's going to work. I don't know if it'd be beneficial to the person to to go through that level. Like we said, part of it's learning and trying and failing. But would it be helpful to have someone actually mathematically show that your that your thing would never work? Although a lot of it's opinion basis, like does that person have the skill set, or can they attract the people that have the skill set? But every once in a while, it's here's a tool, here's a new economy that I want to bring up, or a new currency. And like universal basic income is something that I'm very interested in, but I'm very concerned about. Not just the transition to it, but also, is it sustainable? And I know some of the arguments on both sides, but I still kind of feel like there's something out there that there's a concern, an unspoken concern there, of what might result in a society. But so that'd be an interesting one as well. But it does kind of have to be a specific proposal.
Yeah. What do you think about doing a fake one? Like, choosing something that people in some fictional universe are arguing over. So A, doesn't matter, and B, you kind of have a limited amount of evidence available, like kind of only what's in that show or movie or whatever it is.
I'm reticent to do that. I know you're planning on doing that for WikiLection, and I think that does show off the WikiLection features, and this sort of thing can show off. Oh, and technically, I guess I did do that, because the example on my website is Fiction City deciding to close a street, right? So I have done that. So that's true. I guess if we could find something that was more provable than just an opinion, like if you want to say, who's the best, even like who was the best actor who played this thing, but that's really real. But no, who, like favorite Star Wars character or something like that.
Yeah.
That's all opinion based, but
Who should have won Game of Thrones?
right. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, those are all going to be hard, but just or like the kind of stupid example that came to mind was there's a part in Futurama where there's two presidents or two presidential candidates having a debate, Jack Johnson and John Jackson, and they're arguing whether like your 5-cent carbon tax is too high, your 5-cent carbon tax isn't high enough. I mean, hopefully a bit better than that, but that's sort of like a very simplistic thing with hopefully a couple layers. I can't think of anything,
I guess I'd be open to that. I do want to make sure that there's a lot of debate websites out there that have just ended up being a place where people argue about these kind of fictional things, and kind of there's Debate Island, and I actually posted on our debate group, and I said this is the nightmare of all of our systems are moving towards, because it's just a group of people just kind of trolling each other with this debate software,
right?
In their memes and their fictional, in the fictional verse, because there's a lot of debates on there about Star Wars and Star Trek and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, so I have a fear of going down that thing. And would there be evidence? Like in a lot of these things, it's evidence based, and it's like, well, your only evidence is what they happen to show in the movies,
right?
But it's I'm not completely close to the idea, but those are my concerns. And something that also be interesting is, as fictional as I thought it'd be great to kind of popularize it a bit, is to actually create a mystery story. So if you think about kind of how Sherlock Holmes functions, he's like bringing together all these facts.
Right.
And it's very deductive and logical. So I thought it'd be interesting to do a short film where it's a detective and he has all the suspects and their percentage of likelihood of being the person. And as he gathers evidence, people kind of move up and down in their rankings, and then, in theory, you have enough evidence that this one person did it.
I like that, because then you've also got like an excuse to kind of have like 4 or 5 of them. Like here's one per suspect, and then you can tell totally different, things and showcase it. That seems like it has a lot of promise. I like that. And
theoretically, it could take an actual movie. And I've thought about doing, and I guess we'd discuss it another time, is taking a debate. And there's a great, I don't know if you know of IQ squared, intelligence I guess it's just IQ squared, but they do debates almost once a month or twice a month or something like that, and they're formal. I can't remember the name of this, but they're the formal debate process where you have 5 minutes each to talk and stuff like that, and then rebuttals and questions. But that's the one where I started going through it, and they spent so much time not presenting evidence that it was really kind of boring to I pulled like, out of their 20 minutes, I pulled like 4 sentences that were actually like pros and cons and evidence based. It was all convincing you.
Just like people being wordsmiths and not actually saying anything of substance.
They were, they were being convincing, but it was all kind of emotional triggers and
right.
As opposed to here's the evidence that I want.
So like politics.
Yeah, right. So I keep thinking maybe I see, and a lot of times they'll just kind of say half of what they mean, and they won't, they don't say where they got that study from. So then, if I want to combat that, I have to go find the study,
right.
And then I have to pay $50 to have access to it and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm just thinking it's hard. The other thing is that maybe just hiring someone who's used to doing fact checking and research and. But then a lot of times they'll go down rabbit trails of proving something which everyone kind of agrees to. So that's a danger as well, that you start filling this debate with all the stuff, and actually a lot of people wouldn't have argued those points. So it's only worthwhile to put it in there if someone actually has that concern.
Yeah. I personally would be interested in seeing what at least one looks like that is like genuinely agreed upon and like it's kind of one-sided. I'd be interested to see what like how that boils out instead of like an actual active contentious thing. Is water wet? Well, hopefully that score is fairly one-sided there.
Although you have to define wet. I did just see a physics girl did an experiment where she dipped her hand into boiling hot oil, and that was the Linden Frost effect.
Okay.
If you do it with a slightly wet hand, although this other scientist had done the same thing with molten lead, but he did it with a dry hand because he's like, well, the transfer of heat isn't really that fast.
Right.
So if you get it in there, get it out, as long as it's not sticking to your skin, you're fine.
Right.
But yeah, that wasn't so much a debate. Well, I guess anything that would have a known conclusion would it might be a good example for it.
Yeah, like what does something look like that's 90% or above?
Yeah.
Like where maybe there's at least one that's like trying to be against it, but it's just thoroughly disproven, so it doesn't have a lot of weight. But
yeah, and you can't really do flat Earth because they have so much.
Yeah, there's
stuff
a
you
lot
have to debunk.
Yeah, and as soon as you debunk it, there's 5 more things.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. But yeah, if I don't know if Adria or you and I could think of something that we honestly disagree on, although I think we're fairly close.
Yeah, I think so.
in a lot of things. I don't know. Do you have an opinion on universal basic income? You may not want to say because of what.
No, mine's almost the exact same. Where it's like I like the idea in concept. I'm worried about the application and like less so about the like the people will get lazy and more like how does this scale? Like what happens if you have 10 billion people and only 9 and only a billion of them sort of won't want to do full time like contributing towards paying for UBI work. What's the cutoff? So right. I just want to see some actual examples in the real world, and they keep getting truncated.
And that's one situation where if you did the reason score, it would probably come to like undecided, and the result is we need to do studies. And
right.
So in that case, the reason score didn't help at all. Except if someone's arguing, yes, I know it'll work, and another person saying, yes, I know it won't work, you get them in there, it's like, okay, you don't know. Let's all put our money in and do a study together.
Right.
Because I think some of the best studies are when it's funded by both sides of the argument by passionate people, and they both get, and I don't know if I've seen this, where they both get to design the study. Because then when it comes out, it won't be so easily like, oh well, you didn't have anyone
Right.
like this. I'm doing a lot of stuff on the keto diet, and it's like, well, this study shows that keto is dangerous. I'm like, you did not have a single person in that study that was in ketosis. Your low carb was like 300 grams of carbs a day, and ketosis is 50 to 100. You can't say, they're making lines and they're taking lines and projecting
Right.
them out, and it's like, well, that's not how reality works. So
Yeah.
that
There's actually,
study.
I'm not sure how you could do this one, but there's a really interesting episode of Mythbusters that I would love to see them do again because I was like, whoa, that's weird. It was where they tested like if plants can react on a polygraph. It was based on a book called The Secret Life of Plants, which I've read, and they did the experiment wrong, like just slightly, because they did it and they actually got a result where it did respond, and they freaked out, and then they kept doing it again to the same plant, and it stopped doing it. Like, okay, it's debunked. Except that if you read the book, that's like the third sentence is that he kept doing it to the same plant and it stopped reacting, so we got a new plant and that plant started reacting. And so it was like the plants get used to you or something according to the book. And as I was reading it, I'm like, this sounds kind of hokey. And then Mythbusters kind of accidentally proved it. I'm like, okay, now I want to see more of this because that's super interesting.
Yeah.
I have one that I looked into when I was doing my undergrad, which was, over 10 years ago. So I don't know if it's been decided, but wild salmon versus farmed salmon. And that farmed salmon kills wild salmon stock, right? That farmed salmon is dangerous for wild salmon. And I wasn't eating wild salmon at all. I wasn't eating farmed salmon at all because I was boycotting it. And when I looked into it, neither the Suzuki Foundation, which was the environmental pro wild salmon, nor the fish farms had done this very simple experiment that would have cost a few $100s and proven one side or the other, but neither side wanted to prove it, right? Because sea lice, it just makes sense. All of these wild salmon have so much sea lice on them. Of course they're getting it from the farm salmon, like logically. And then when you look at when they go through and the life cycle of the lice, it doesn't actually make sense because the lice can't move. So like to just put particles in the water and see where they end up with the currents would be so easy, and yet none of them have done it. Instead, they just want to, like vilify farmed salmon and vilify wild salmon. And that's one issue, right? Forget about all the pollution that comes off the farmed salmon. But like this one issue nobody wants to look into because it's just easy to pick one side and be like, I believe that.
Yeah, that's interesting because it makes me think that if we did have reason score out and was in use, that situations like that, people would see that all this arguing just gets everything to the middle, and it's like, well, if you want to move that dial, do a study. Which oftentimes sometimes you don't want to know. If your identity's in it, if you've worked for 20 years on fighting this thing and then you ran a study and proved that you were wrong, that would be devastating. Now, I don't think people think through that process, but that's kind of the subconscious back of the mind worry. I was digging into my nutrition science, and I invited a guy who opposes my opinions. And I started reading his stuff and listening to his podcast. And I felt that same sort of thing. It's like, oh, that's a good point. And that point scares me. It's like, well, first of all, have I been, for the last 4 years, make it to where I'm going to have a heart attack? But also just I could feel my subconscious fighting me on following the truth because it breaks my identity. That was a really interesting experience. So yeah, so if anyone either has a topic and either knows the hard part is finding two people that would disagree. So either one of y'all would have to actually disagree with me on something, or we'd have to find another person that does, that are all willing to kind of do it. So my next tactic is to get this guy who believes that that is against the keto diet, and I'm going to have him participate, and I'm also going to put it out on Twitter to those communities, both kind of his community and my community, and have them kind of feed in facts to it. We'll see if that works. Yeah. So I'm sorry I didn't take up the whole hour as a hot seat, but that was the idea.
It's cool. That was a pretty detailed, sort of nicely wandering conversation throughout the various bits and pieces.
Yeah.
I feel like is masks, no masks to hot button right now for that to be a thing that Reason Score deals with, because it feels like not only is the information changing every day, it's also like people have their one viewpoint, and I find a lot of it is also sensory based, that people don't want to wear masks, so therefore they're going to find them to not wear masks versus looking at the actual science. And yet it's very true. It's hard to wear a mask and to not honor that, right? That like this actually isn't easy and it costs something. But it's the science of, is this good for the population? And then it's not actually protecting you, it's protecting everybody else. And then, yeah.
For the people I know that don't wear masks tend to believe that COVID is not a hoax, but it's so overblown. So that gets into the whole, is everyone lying to you? And the truth is, yes, the media is lying. Oh, the media is exaggerating. The government is exaggerating, but that doesn't mean that it's not something we should put. So it kind of gets into the other discussion pretty quickly. But if I found someone who was concerned about the disease but thought you didn't have to wear a mask, I mean, actually, like, we don't wear masks outdoors usually anymore, unless we're in a confined space. Like if I was in a protest, I'd probably wear a mask, but just walking around the parks and stuff, we don't. So that would probably be an interesting. Yeah, that would work if we have two people on either side.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things that I've come up against, which is possibly my identity, and that was like the discussion of free speech and like the technical no, you don't get to say anything you want to me and I don't get offended. Like there actually are consequences to your actions, but is that like, I don't.
That may be one of the things that you solve the debate when you frame the question. Mm-hmm. So there's several things. It's like saying, is this person racist or not? Well, once you define racist, don't you have a definition? The answer is the person is, yes, both is racist and isn't racist, because racist has multiple definitions and they fit some and not the other. So when you frame it down, it's like, and really the amazing exercise of just clarifying the actual question solves the debate. And that may be one of them, but it's still good to go through the exercise. And a lot of times you have to put, here's the statement in there. And then when you start putting the facts in, people realize, oh, we're talking about two different things. And then they argue about the definition of racism, which I don't ever argue about definitions. There's very few words that have a single definition. And so we just agree which definition we're talking about, or what two definitions we're talking about. And that's two different answers, and we're settled. We're in agreement. Yeah. What was the? No, I did the diatribe and I forgot what your topic was.
Free speech.
Oh yeah, yeah. So to put this in, you'd have to have a very specific statement, because the thing about free, it's free to say whatever you want, and it's free for that other person to call you whatever they want back. Yeah. Including cussing at you and telling you you're an idiot. Well, me yelling you down is a part of the free speech process. If you don't like it, don't talk. It's when I have the government put you in jail for speaking.
Yeah.
So, but that would be an interesting discussion, because I think oftentimes they are getting at something else. Like that's what they're saying is their intuitive thing. But if you explored it with them, it'd be something. That does get into the whole conversation about deplatforming, which is interesting. If someone's going to a university, should they be allowed to do that? Or, they're allowed to stand on their street corner and say it. So that would be, and then whether there's allowed, whether they're legal, like have a right to do it. And then even if they don't have a right to do it, should we still allow it, even if they disagree with us? Right. So that's another thing. That's a separate debate. One could be true and one could be false. So that would be that would be another interesting topic.
Great timely one. Should J.K. Rowling be canceled? That's the question, and then we can go through but there's no evidence. Like it's all emotion,
Yeah.
right? Like there is no scientific paper. It's like I feel very strongly this way, or I feel very strongly this way. There is no. It's like you can disagree with the thing and not have her like because there's so many broad like the matrix of whether you agree or disagree is itself very complex.
Yeah.
And do we cancel women for lesser acts than we cancel men? That was actually what came up for me this week. And it's like, I think we do, but I don't know the evidence, right? So is it just my feeling or is it?
So have we been doing that as opposed to should we? I mean, I guess you're assuming shouldn't, but have we been?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't even know how we would look into that, right?
So that might be go back to we need to do a study on that. Not that we have to run an experiment, but someone needs to sit down, classify what is a cancellation, and then take maybe a random sampling. How big is that? So that does, I think, get into I'd be interesting to talk to someone who said we don't, because I often find we have higher expectations for how women and people of color speak in general. But yeah, whether there's evidence of that, there might be studies. I mean, there has been studies showing that women tend to get interrupted more in meetings than men. So you could use that as evidence to say, wow, we can just kind of there's a high chance that correlates to social media, right? But so that would be interesting to look to see if there are any studies on that. But a lot of things like that, and what Reason Score kind of leads me to is often it's great to kind of know whether that's true or not, but really what are we getting at when we're exploring that issue? We're trying, there's some sort of reaction. It's like, should we then think twice before canceling women that because we know that there's a bias? What's the conclusion of that being true? What's the action we want to take? And let's kind of debate that action rather than whether this fact is true.
Yeah, because then it becomes the opposite. Then you're like, well, we're not going to cancel women when they say anything because we know that we're biased against them. So then we never cancel them and it goes the opposite way, right? And it's like, okay, let's not look at it. Let's look at the actual thing that was said. And do we cancel them or not based on this? And that's...
I do wonder how you'd handle the opposite side of that, which is I think it's true that we probably do cancel women and people of color easier for sort of smaller infractions. But I think also people are more likely to believe claims against them without evidence. Whereas, like, Johnny Depp was a good example. Amber Heard said something about Johnny Depp. Great, you're canceled, your movie's canceled, you're gone forever. And then the recordings come out, we're like, oh, turns out maybe that's not what happened. And then nothing really came out of that. Like them finding out that she was lying. And to me, at least, that sounds like kind of two sides of the same coin. Like how are the various groups treated in trying to figure out if they should be canceled or not?
Yeah, when really, I guess in that whole situation is I would like to write up a more objective way to determine when we should. So I'd have a proposal saying we should cancel people when X situation occurs. And then that would help with both of that, canceling too much or too little, because then it's not so subjective, it's more objective. Of course, once you have stuff like that, people will game it, but it's probably better than this kind of group mob. It kind of encourages mob mentality when you don't have any sort of guidelines, and they don't have to be rules, but they could be guidelines, and people can point to it and say, well, in this situation, I probably wouldn't cancel this person because here's the guidelines.
Right. Bentley, do you have like a list of sort of the higher level, either the questions to ask about the topics or like the different categories they fit in? Because I found that like throughout us trying to find out where it was, you seem to know it quite well, right? Like, oh, well, that you have to figure out the definition, and with this you have to do that. Do you have a roadmap for that part of it? Because that might help figure out what we could talk about, couldn't talk about, and sort of where you have gaps in like, oh, this is a cool topic, but there's nothing there. Like we don't have any examples.
No. So that's a good thing. Maybe we should do a blog post on what makes a good Reason Score debate. because that I was thinking a second ago, well, that all kind of comes out in the debate, but then I keep thinking, oh yeah, I've been kind of poo-pooing ideas throughout this whole thing, and maybe it'd be easier if I would come up with here's the narrow topic type that I think would be useful. So yeah, I'll put that on a to-do list. And although a lot of times I'm making it too narrow, and I really just need to play with it, so I need to stop being so over optimizing, which is the
I know
habit.
one of the hard things that I have to sort of come to grips with WikiLection is when trying to solve problems, understanding that some problems will be in that we don't have enough information state right now. And like being okay with that, because that's actually the truth right now. We don't have enough information. If that's the answer, cool, then we need more information. But right now you can sort of say, no, both sides are a bit right and a bit wrong because there's parts, but we just don't know enough.
And that's still very valuable, because then all these people kind of yelling about it on social media, you can tell them, well, you don't have enough information to make that conclusion. I mean, you could keep saying it, but I'm just going to ignore you now and move on to other things, because
This one might be too timely because it's going to pop out of existence at any point, but the Chaz Autonomous Region in Seattle, because Kira just posted something that Jordan will end up commenting on that was like, whichever one you want that news to be, but pay attention to the opposite, right? So if you're a socialist utopian, pay attention to the ones that are saying it's falling apart. If you're the one who's like, it's falling apart, it's anarchism, pay attention to pick your bias, be concerned about your bias. And I thought that was it, because there's what's actually happening, and all of that's happening, right? But even if it pops out of existence, what was it, right? What was that actually looking like? Was there a spark of something that could have been bigger? I don't even know what the question is. But to say, hey, should there be a Chaz? Should it exist? Should this happen in more other locations? I'm just going to pause myself.
I think news poses an interesting challenge for Reason Score, because if it's meant to be sort of like, here's what we know, that's really hard with news now, because there's so many different, like, we can't even agree what's happening in the world, and like, did this person die or not? Like, what happened? And that it's so that.
Yeah, I mean, and at least we'll know we don't know, but yeah. Yeah, and that's part of the problem of what Reason Score is trying to fix.
Right.
Is that is kind of give us that, what kind of agree at least on what we do, what's knowable.
Right.
I'm gonna leave you guys to this and go and deal with some life stuff.
Okay.
See you later. Bye.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'll make a blog post about that, and in the past I've posted some topics, or actually you can go to procon.org and almost any of those will, with some change. That's if it's still up. They were recently bought by somebody, which I can't remember who.
Oh, I think this is the one that I remember checking this before. I just want to see, pick a random one. So I know it seemed like for them they always tried to keep the number of points even, which I wasn't a big fan of. Yeah, it's kind of cool though. It's a good proof of concept for what we're both working on.
Yeah. And actually, the CEO from procon.org, I have a friend who's talking to him about some future work in the debate space.
Okay.
So it'll be interesting. Yeah. So the top thing is the 2020 U.S. election.
Right.
Yeah, so really almost any of these would work if I could find two people that were relatively polite and were willing to work with a tool in beta.
Right.
And I'm thinking the best process would be to do it like a game. So each person gets 2 moves before the other person does, and do it like that.
Yeah, I think that's got more pull to it to get people interested. What would happen there, like if the other side sort of didn't have anything to add, but the other side did, right? Like, so I go, you go, I go, you go, I go, and then you add yours, and I don't have anything more to add, but you still have 10 more things.
Well, I think at the time you don't have anything to add, the score theoretically should be for the other person. So if you don't have anything to add, then you have to kind of concede the debate at that point, because you may intuitively feel that it's wrong, and the thing is, well, come back to us when you have more info, but until you have some facts, the other person quote wins. And then you just have to find, but usually there'll be yeah, so that's the goal, is to get it down to where someone has nothing to add.
Cool.
Yeah, that's success. It worked.
And the things to add are actually facts, as in proven, documented facts.
Well, you can, that's kind of where it leans, but there are times where you're also talking about logic, like that doesn't apply because of X. And also you can put in things like, well, there's a chance that X might happen. So if, like, we're talking about the disease, the pandemic, 3 months ago, it's like, well, we don't know the R number. We don't know how fast this transmits. And it's like, well, in that case, maybe we should social distance because we don't know. So that's not like linked to a study or anything like that. That's just kind of like a logical conclusion statement that then people can pro con and say, well, let's wait for the data to come out because it will ruin our economy. And the other person's like, well, by the time you have the data, if it is a high R number, because it grows exponentially, it's too late. And a substantial percentage of people will die. So that, it's not always facts, but we certainly encourage fact-based stuff. And the other thing is, no fact is ever really proven. I guess it's proven, but a study doesn't prove a fact, because people then come in and say why that study was wrong and stuff like that. But they all have a certain probability of accuracy.
Right. Yeah, I think with all of this, and it's something that I think people will have a hard time grasping, is it's not that we're saying what's like 100% true. It's what seems to be most likely to be true based on the current information available.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is a mouthful and doesn't give people a lot of confidence, but like that's what we're actually saying here. Because people who make sweeping generalizations about like this is 100% true probably aren't basing that on evidence. They're just saying that because that's their side and that's how they talk.
Yeah, so I think I'll do that blog post, and then I'll probably link to procon.org, because actually none of these are phrased properly. Well, let's see. But it's a good starting point for ideas, I guess. Because even the homework one, is homework beneficial? Which really, that's not the question. The question is, how much homework is beneficial?
And what kinds?
I guess if someone might be arguing, if someone wants to argue that any work outside the classroom is detrimental, then that could be a debate. Yes.
Right.
So even their pro one, homework improves student achievement, and con one is too much homework can be harmful. Well, those are not opposites.
Yeah, true. That can be. Both of those can very much be true at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's also improve student achievement. Well, okay, but if you structured your education around making it prove that homework is useful, I was terrible at doing homework and actually doing stuff like that. I still did okay in tests. I think everyone is different. It's the whole trying to teach a fish to climb a tree thing.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that's where I took a look at the site, because it did have some similarities to WikiLection where I was trying to sort of compare like apples to apples in that same kind of a grid. And then I saw some of them that like when I've seen other people talk about it, it's a very one-sided debate. Like one side has 1,000 things to talk about, and the other one has like 2 that it refuses to like get proven wrong. And then they had them like with like 3 or 4 points each, and I'm like, that's not a representative of what this debate actually is.
Yeah, yeah. And I thought it was great when I first saw it. Then I thought about it. Yeah, it's kind of yeah, it's a bit misleading. It really seems to lead you to, I don't know, despair, because every point you look at, it's like, well, those are some good points, those are some bad points on one side, and then those are some good points, those are some bad points on the other side. And it's like my brain I can't do anything with this information. It just leaves me to believe that no one knows the truth.
Right.
And so,
yeah. And on every issue, you're like, oh, we know
Right.
nothing. Great.
Right.
So like that one thing that you were scared about with Reason Score, there's a whole site based on that. Like, we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So I found it kind of depressing. In Reason Score might be the same way. It might be like, oh, we don't have over 10% confidence in anything. It's like, oh, sorry. Although a lot of times, if you're talking about should we do this proposal or not, it's like, well, if it's 1% better than the other side, then let's do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And there are some things, like you mentioned with the pandemic thing, where like, okay, there's the like what's happening, but there's almost a pre-conversation with, okay, what is the level of confidence, like what are the numbers that we need to see to say that one thing wins over another? Because, you know, if it has a certain like infection rate, then when we actually are able to prove it, it's going to be way too late. And like my whole thing with global warming, it's like it's pretty easy to say, whoops, turns out, you know, these parts weren't right. Okay, let's scale back up these industries, as opposed to it's hard to undo that.
Yeah.
And so like I haven't done a bunch of research. The science leaning people I know, it doesn't seem that two-sided of a conversation, but even just that pre-conversation of what are sort of the outcomes, like what are the risks involved, and how much would one side need to win over the other for it to actually be like, oh, if they're even, you know, we may still want to lead in one direction over another, or at least say, you know, one's like business and one's personal health. Mm-hmm. So however you lean, you know, that's sort of the key issues and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I've been thinking like right now, if it's between, well, right now it goes from plus 100 to minus 100. So if it's like from -5 to +5, then I have that whole range is undecided. But later there may not be. Only if it's like right in the middle would it be undecided, and then it's like, well, maybe true or slightly true would be helpful. Yeah. I had another
one topic there. Could be space flight, and do we need it? And it's too broad, so that's different. Should we spend public money on space flight? Should we let the space to be privatized? I've seen a lot of debates on this one because of SpaceX and Dragon and the booming private space business. So there are lots of arguments, and seeing actually ordered debate on the subject would be cool.
Yeah, that would be a really good one. I guess there's several debates in that area. Like, yes, should we allow private corporations to lift off? Which I guess right now in the United States, they do have to have permission from the government. I think internationally, if you have a rocket leaving the Earth's atmosphere, I think you have to get approval from some international body right now.
But then again, if you leave, then
yeah, what are they going to do about it?
I'm out of your jurisdiction now. I'm in space.
Are you really going to shoot me down? It was funny. It was interesting watching one of the Mars things, because right now no one can own anything outside of the Earth by international treaty. Now, not all countries have signed that treaty, and of course, if you're a space pirate flying out in space, you don't belong to any of the countries that, you know. If you're your own country, you didn't sign anything. But the other countries could come and wipe you off the face of whatever
Right.
planet you land on, right? But yeah, it'd be interesting to narrow down those topics. I'd have to see the debates to see what people are actually arguing about. Like, are they saying that no privatized company should have the ability to create a full rocket, right? In order to prevent companies from being able to go out into space, or are they afraid of, companies owning asteroids and stuff like that? So yeah, it's best to get down to really the more specific, the better. We got about 5 more minutes. I appreciate everyone talking about Reason Score. Any closing thoughts or topics, or anyone want to promote anything? And Martus, you're working on another project in addition to Adriel's, right? And that's private right now. You're not talking about it.
Oh, it's a project that I had in my mind for like 25 years now, longer, something, and it mutated over the time, of course. Until recently, I found that it has something to do with mind mapping and general mapping of stuff. And I did have discussions with the mapping people, again, in general, from Game B and from the brain as well, the BRANE brain. Which was very cool and very interesting, and some other people as well. And fortunately for me, the thing I am working on is slightly different from anything else. So I'm going to try very hard to actually finish the prototype and show it to you. And then it is something that I am going I'm going to use for my own making sense of my own thoughts and information, because you said something, Bentley, like this before, that you had thoughts about other projects and you found that if you only had Reason Score ready, it would be easier for you to do some other stuff. A couple of meetings ago. So I find very similar thing with this. I have lots of links and information and knowledge, pointers to knowledge on specific topics that would be very good to put in order and see connections between and make it's like seeing the big picture in one place and on one screen, something like this.
Yeah.
So I want something like this too.
Yeah, that sounds like one of those kind of like fundamental technologies that maybe we should call it sense tech, like sense making. But it's a core, and the hardest thing about that type of functionality is because it does so much, people can't wrap their mind around it, and then people really need, if you're out trying to market it, you need a specific use case that people can wrap their mind around. And my problem with Reason Score, and you might have this with yours as well, is that it's hard for me to focus down on a single use case because I hate doing that. But you're not even but yeah, if you find something useful, and I know lots of people that would be interested in seeing that. If you looked in the space, you probably also have heard of Jerry from Jerry's Brain, Jerry Michael.
Yeah, I did talk to him.
Okay, good. Yeah,
he's awesome.
And he's doing. And have you talked to him about the new project he's doing? Did you see that?
The new project.
I think. Yeah, I'll send you a link.
I think so.
But when you get that prototype, we'd love to have you in the Canonical Debate Lab just to show it off, because they're always interested in mapping tech, even if it's not exactly the argument stuff we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll be happy to show it as soon as I fix the last bug in the prototype.
All right.
I did show it to James Weir some time ago when it was much less ready than it is now. and his feedback was positive. So.
Great. Okay. Well, I guess we're gonna go ahead and finish up this call.
Alrighty. Goodbye, YouTube and Facebook.